Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are live once again with another episode of Empire State of Baseball. This is episode number 113 on January 21st of the year 2025. We are airing on Instagram, X, YouTube, and powered by StreamYard. Well, we continue our off-season segment, and it's probably one of our more entertaining episodes, definitely our most entertaining build-up. It's Hall of Fame Day, and we're actually, for the first time ever, doing the show live alongside the Hall of Fame announcements themselves. So the announcements for the actual MLB Hall of Fame were about an hour and a half or so back. So we're actually doing the show the same day of the live results. As many of you know, tuning in, we've been pooling ballots from all of you. We've been doing Twitter polls, because in conjunction with the actual Hall of Fame, we do our ESB Hall of Fame class. The Empire State of Baseball Writers Association is going to go ahead and reveal our results, as well as discussing the actual MLB results today. But before we dive into that, Joe, how are you feeling on this fine Tuesday evening?
I'm feeling well. I love Hall of Fame talk. I love Hall of Fame announcements. I love the conversation leading up to it. I know a lot of people have different opinions, different guys, but I find it so fun. I think everybody's kind of had a different approach in what they think a Hall of Famer is or isn't. I think the one thing that we can all agree upon right now is that Rich used way too much gel in his hair, because that stuff's not moving in a hurricane.
Are we sure it's gel?
But we're gonna see. We're really excited. There's about 400 and something votes, and we got about 100 something votes in our poll. So we got about a quarter of the actual ballot in. So I'm curious to see what the results. We got 40 more votes than we did last year, at least. So that's going to be fun. I just like the conversation leading up to it.
Love the conversation, and it's been a lot of wild conversation. If you join some of the family on X and the Spaces, it's been crazy. The Hall of Fame talk has been insane. But yes, as Corey mentioned, we are in conjunction with the actual Hall of Fame, the National Baseball Hall of Fame's election, which saw 3 new members join Cooperstown, and we'll get into that shortly. I'm in the suit, how to do the part. I mean, these people who are coming on for the last few episodes probably think I just wear a suit now for every single show, and only a couple times I actually wear shorts and or slacks. Not slacks. Tom is slacks. Tom back in the sunglasses again on this January day. Thomas, it's looking sunny in that new studio you got there.
Yeah, it's hot. It's sunny down here. Takes are hot. Room is hot. No, it's freezing. It's freezing cold. I just can't stand to look at Joe directly. It's like a Medusa situation. If you look at him dead in the eyes, you turn to stone. So I'm just trying to protect myself.
Good man. Love it. Love seeing you rock those welding glasses. Now, before I go to Corey Favs with tonight's rundown, let's get through the crowd and see who's joined us for this Hall of Fame special. Thus far, 40 plus in the building. So let's just keep those numbers up. Make sure to send a link out, guys, to YouTube preferably. But, of course, we're live on Instagram and on X as well. Shout out to H.O. That's the kind of advance notice I'm talking about. H.O. sent this on Thursday when we scheduled this episode. So shout out to H.O. For being the first in the building, and hopefully he's still here. Shout out to Jacob Petruzzi, $10. Rich is wearing a suit. We got Joey Bag of Donuts, host of the Morning Drive. The one person that didn't vote for Ichiro Suzuki dropped the ball worse than Mark Andrews on that 2-point.
Joey Bag of Donuts, get the fuck out of here.
Nasty.
Get the fuck out of here. I can't. We can't have that right now.
Guys, just in case you don't realize, Tom is a Ravens fan and Notre Dame fan. So that tells you the kind of weekend Tom just had.
I will kick people out. I don't have the authority to, but I will find a way to kick you out of this chat if I need to. Okay.
Keith's in the building. O'Shea says, shout out to Keith. Rich, start the show so we can curse out Brian Kenny. Christy Evans taking the bet. Rich, you owe me $10. Why do I owe you $10? Mike Parziali in the building. Smack that like and subscribe. We got Jack Esposito, Big Slick. Why is Rich in a suit? Jacob Petruzzi go, Rich, who's getting married? L.I. Yankee King, who's the best at coming up with fantasy grades. Congratulations to CC Sabathia. Rich looking good. Clean up nice. Thank you, L.I. We got Yachty in the building. Rich be wearing a suit, but But the way I understood it is if they agree with Jacob, they won the bet. Yeah, there was some money on the line apparently about me wearing a suit or not. Victor's in the building. Shout out to Victor. Rich looks like he's not allowed within 500 feet of any Chuck E. Cheese. And Swift, CC Sabathia. Oh, yeah, Joe, got to be reminded of how CC Sabathia did in the voting. But we're going to get more into those Hall of Fame results and, of course, our simulated results later. But Corey Favs, take it away with what we got going down for episode 113.
Yeah, no, listen, today is all about the Hall of Fame. And again, we're going to divide the show up into two segments. We're going to start off talking about the actual MLB Hall of Fame class for this year. So who got introduced? We're going to dive in person by person, run through all of the candidates who got elected, run through the candidates who we think got snubbed, who was deserving, everything Cooperstown related. That's coming up first. And then we're going to wrap up the show with our Empire State of Baseball Writers Association of America Awards, where we will reveal the fan ballots. All of you ESB faithfuls out there who submitted a ballot, voted on X, wherever you did the submission for us, your votes counted. So looking forward to see who may or may not have gotten elected into the Hall of Fame from the ESB fan vote and comparing it to the actual MLB vote. And I'm really looking forward to that because, again, this is the first time we're doing the show on the same day. Usually this ends up happening a day or so before. So it's really nice to see the comparison of what actually went down versus what the people think. And, we're men of the people. So looking forward to see what you all had to say.
Of course. And before we get into the BBWAA's election, a couple more shout outs. CK, we got Jordan, our very own Sierra's in the building. We got Joe in the building as well, SJ83 and Basant as well. All righty, let's get into it. So kicking off our class of 2025, we start off with the most obvious one of the bunch who made it into Cooperstown, announced earlier, and that is, of course, Ichiro Suzuki. Ichiro Suzuki, 10-time All-Star, AL MVP, and Rookie of the Year the same year, 2001. Single-season hits leader with breaking George Sisler's record, and a 10-time Gold Glove Award winner. And Ichiro, the tale of two careers, because literally he's a Hall of Famer in two sides of the world. And Ichiro Suzuki, the first Japanese-born Hall of Famer, so congratulations to Ichiro. Well, see, there you go, Joe. Folks who have been criticizing Joe for the last month, see, he was going to vote Ichiro. Ichiro's a former Yankee. So enough of that hoopla. Ichiro, former Yankee for a couple years. But, Joe, your thoughts on Ichiro Suzuki's induction into Cooperstown?
Yeah, well-deserved on multiple levels. First, he's a pioneer in terms of the offensive Japanese player. There were a couple of Japanese players that come over, Hideo Nomo, that were pitchers, and really found some success in MLB. Ichiro was the first person that came over and said, okay, the great Japanese player is equal to the great American player or the great MLB player in this situation. And so all the accolades that he had, 10 seasons in a row with 200 hits, 10 seasons in a row with 100 runs scored, a defensive wizard, an unbelievable arm in right field, and really kind of a dying breed of player. There are no players like Ichiro. There were players probably before. You could call him the Japanese version of Pete Rose because that's really what he was. He was very similar to Tony Gwynn. Those players, for the most part, don't exist very much anymore. And so Ichiro is a completely different brand of baseball that might be past us. We have very few guys like that. Maybe Luis Ariz is one, and Stephen Kwan is another.
Don't bring Luis Ariz in the same.
I'm saying in terms of the philosophy of the way they play baseball, but Ichiro was just the picture perfect leadoff hitter. That's what he was. He had speed, he had pizzazz, he had hustle. He would put the ball where the fielders weren't. It was find any way to get to first base. That was Ichiro's game, and he is one of the best all time at that. Well-deserved Hall of Fame. I'm not going to get caught up in the unanimous versus non-unanimous. I know he fell one vote shy of unanimous. I'm not going to get caught up in that. Anytime you're above 95%, you're in rare air as far as the Hall of Fame is concerned. Well-deserved. Focus on the player and not on the percentage that he got by not getting the unanimous.
Yeah. No, Ichiro Suzuki, in a class of his own in that type of element from our lifetime. I mean, this is a guy who played 19 years. In his 19 years, he had more seasons with more than 200 hits than he had less than 200 hits. And of those years, he actually led the league in hits 7 times. He led the league in average twice. And those two averages, a 350 and a 372. Those are averages you see maybe at the end of April, first week of May, when someone's red hot. To Joe's point, Luis Arias tends to be in that conversation around that time of the season. Ichiro did it over 157 plate appearances in the 350 season and games, and 161 games the year he did it in 372. I mean, this is a guy who did not take a day off, hit each game he went in. I mean, the guy's an absolute stud. I mean, you see the numbers here too. So many Gold Gloves, All-Star appearances. I mean, you name it. MVP, Rookie of the Year. He was one of the most entertaining players for me to watch as a kid growing up. Came into the league in 2001, so that's probably right around the time I really started to watch baseball. Obviously I'm a lot older than that, but 2001 is probably when I first really started to watch. So, phenomenal player. Well-deserving. I think the one person who didn't vote for him probably forgot to submit a ballot. Maybe they fell asleep, got drunk. I don't know what it is. Ichiro is a no-doubter in my book.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else there is to add. He is an undoubtable whatever Hall of Famer. He should have been 100%. There's been a lot of guys that should have been 100%. Some of the BBWAA guys like to make this more about them than the players, which we'll kind of get into more probably on our third selection here. But Ichiro is great. I think the one thing that kind of not gets lost in the Hall of Fame, but we talk so much about numbers for Hall of Fame. Do you have this WAR? Do you have this many hits, this many strikeouts, this many wins, this many whatever? If you're a baseball fan, you know a Hall of Famer when you see one. You watch them, you go to a game, you see that player, and you say that you just know if you've seen enough baseball. Ichiro is a Hall of Famer. He stood out in the highest league of baseball in the world. If you saw him play, you knew he was the best player on the field, and he was doing something that no one else was able to do. Just incredible player.
Absolutely. Ichiro Suzuki went in with 99.7% of the vote in his first ballot. Only one person left them off their ballot, and hopefully that person never gets the chance to vote again when these festivities come up. So, yes, the video game averages for each of those years. I agree with you, Mike Pars. All right, we'll move on to the next guy who was announced, who went in on 86.8% of the ballot. Also, his first ballot as well. Tom, let's talk about CC Sabathia going in to Cooperstown.
Let's talk about CC Sabathia, another guy that absolutely deserved to go into the Hall of Fame. See his accolades on the screen here. He had an insane peak when he was, especially they talk about that time in Milwaukee where he threw every 3 days and dragged a carcass of a team to the playoffs. It was incredible as a Yankee. He was a big game pitcher too. It's another thing I think that gets lost sometimes in is just someone a Hall of Famer or not, is did they shrink or did they grow in the big spots? And CC was someone who wanted the ball in the big spot and showed up and delivered. A Yankee great. He's 3,000 strikeouts, 250 wins. I think only 3 lefties have 3,000 strikeouts. He's one of the best left-handed starting pitchers of all time. He deserved to be in the Hall of Fame. And I was a little worried that he maybe wasn't going to get on the first time because, again, some of the writers are jackasses and they like to not put guys in right away. But they didn't mess around. At least they didn't mess around enough here with CC, and he made it in. Joe, I'm sure, is heartbroken. I don't think Joe's going to sleep tonight at the thought that CC Sabathia is in the Hall of Fame. And you know what? It sucks to be Joe.
Joe, not a CC Sabathia supporter for first.
Listen, it's again, I'm not. My idea is never to attack, a player for their career. any child want to be CC Sabathia and have his career? The answer is yes. He had a phenomenal career. I am a small hall guy. For me, I didn't, and we'll get to my ballot later. I wouldn't have voted for him. That's just my particular thing. Out of 88 pitchers in the Hall of Fame, CC's ERA would be 86th. And so for me, my most important stats when I look at something are not the strikeouts or the wins or things like that. I'm looking at run prevention, ERA, WHIP, FIP, ERA plus. And to me, that puts CC in a hall of very good, not a hall of elite. Did he have a great peak for a 4 or 5 year period where he was one of the best pitchers in baseball? Yes, he did. But the fact of the matter is he was a mediocre pitcher for more times than he was a dominant pitcher. And
you're comparing he pitched in the heart of, or the kind of the tail end part of the steroid era where ERAs are higher. That's how it is. But you can't compare him to guys who
why
in
is
the 80s and early 90s.
But why is Roy Halladay, who pitched in the same league at the same time, won 2 Cy Youngs and had an ERA half a run less than CC? Why didn't that affect him? And so
he's a Hall of Famer too. Roy Halladay is a better pitcher than CC.
Right, but
I know we have the that CC got a higher percentage. He shouldn't have. Roy Halladay it should have also been a slam dunk Hall of Famer. It's ridiculous that he didn't get a higher percentage of the vote.
But my philosophy is, if I go and look at Hall of Famers of this era, right, and I compare CC to them, CC doesn't stack up to all the Hall of Famers of this era. Let's be honest. He doesn't stack up to Johnson or Maddox or Clemens or
a lot of those guys. The time you can't compare him to Clemens. Clemens
aside,
but even still, even the Randy Johnsons, the Maddox, and those guys, it's in the 90s, and I understand that's where people think of like peak steroids because of McGuire and Sosa, but really the kind of peak steroid era of it just kind of running rampant comes later, is where it comes where it's everywhere. It's not just select guys.
Like I said, my ultimate thing was I look at other Hall of Famers and even look at Hall of Famers right now. Kershaw, Verlander, and Scherzer are all walking into the Hall of Fame. He's not as good as any of those guys.
Great.
Probably not, but he's still a Hall of Famer.
No, and again, it's not to be an insult to him. It's just to say, for me, if I'm looking at all those guys, if I'm looking at Kershaw, Verlander, and Scherzer lined up in a row, I'd be like, okay, there's probably each one probably has 3 or 4 different stats that they're better in. The problem is, I just think there's a drop off when you get to CC. I think he's more in the category of Andy Pettitte and Mark Burley, where they're really good pitchers, they're workhorses, they're innings eaters. There's guys
young
that you want on your
team.
CC
has 3,000 Ks. He's better than those guys.
Yeah, I mean, I just gotta jump in here for a bit. Like the one thing I grew up on when a Hall of Famer was certain ticket punches to get you in. Offensively, it was 3,000 hits, it was 500 home runs. For pitchers, it was 300 wins, 300 Ks, the 3,000 Ks. Why not that ticket for you, Joe? Like, why did you ever not believe in that concept, or?
I didn't really believe in that concept. If you go back and look at all the players that have gotten there's a lot of similarities to them. I think that went out the window with Craig Biggio. I don't think Craig Biggio is a Hall of Famer just because he got to 3,000 hits. He hung on for 25 seasons, and he was a 75 OPS plus his last 3 seasons to squeak his way to 3,000 hits. And to me, I'm looking at the particular pitchers. I'm looking at run prevention, right? If your ace has a 3.74 ERA this year, are you going to be happy with that? If you're
not in this era, but Joe, we've also can't ignore the fact that we've also talked about periods of dominance as well. And CC had a 7-year period where he had a 3.14 in an era where offense was up. So you got to give credit to that. I understand there were better pitchers during that era, but giving CC that credit. Now, listen, if the question is CC deserving of a first ballot Hall of Fame? That could be a better conversation. I definitely do think CC's a Hall of Famer. And I think it also spars another interesting conversation. And shout out to Christy Evans, who mentioned this earlier on his space. when it comes down to the first ballot, I want to get Corey Favs in here. When it comes down to voting a certain player in based on the fact that he was on the first or second ballot of the Hall of Fame, just looking at a guy like CC, I'm sure there were voters who looked at him as like, well, I think he's a Hall of Famer, but he's not a first ballot Hall of Famer. Do you guys agree with keeping that?
That's the biggest crock of shit.
I was getting to it. Do you guys agree with that distinction? I'll start with Corey Favs here in terms of that kind of voting.
I gave it some thought too, especially after our last show a few weeks ago when we were, debating a few things. And I actually more so lean, you're either a Hall of Famer or you're not. All right. So I don't, necessarily buy, well, it took this guy 4 years, so this guy's got to go 4 years. And I made an argument about that too, about CC Sabathia last time. I did the Mike Mussina comparison because their career numbers somewhat similar. When you look at ERA and wins and whatnot, relatively similar. And it took Mussina 6 years, I think, to make the ballot. But honestly, I don't. I don't think. I think you're either a Hall of Famer or you're not. The only instance where it might hurt you if you have a year where you're absolutely stacked. But again, you're never going to have a situation where 10 guys should get elected. I know a lot of people do the full 10. I could not disagree more. There's never going to be 10 guys, absolutely no doubt, Hall of Famers on the ballot at any given time. The only other instance it becomes an issue is over the course of a 5 to 10 year period, you'll start to phase out some older writers who had their own mindset, their own philosophy, and you phase in more modern writers, again, with a completely different philosophy, grew up, watched games in a different era. That could swing votes too. But again, you're talking over a 10-year period. You're not talking about a 30-year period for voting on a player. So I do think you're in the Hall of Fame or you're not. I could see the instance where if you have a guy who's around 60%, yeah, maybe he gets to the 75% in a few years' time as the philosophy starts to change. But more times than not, you're either in or you're not, in my opinion.
Tom, you think that's a crock of shit? How about we go to you and then we'll go over to Joe on that question?
Yeah, exactly, Corey. You are or you are not a Hall of Famer. And if your ballot is full, if you're voting for 10 guys, then I understand if you want to add them later. Frankly, if you don't put them on your first ballot, unless that first ballot is full, you shouldn't be able to vote for them moving forward. Because nothing has changed. Like not CC Sabathia, Mike Mussina didn't pick up any more wins. He didn't give up any more home runs. He didn't field any more ground balls. His career was over, and you can evaluate on that. If you want to even give someone maybe a 1 year grace period that they saw some backlash and they thought, okay, let me reconsider this player. I'll entertain that thought. But past that, no, their careers don't change. You either vote them in or you don't. The BBWAA, not necessarily as a whole, but some members of it make this process about them more than they make it about the players. And it's why Ichiro wasn't unanimous and why Jeter wasn't unanimous or Griffey. That's just as egregious. And we're going to get to Billy Wagner as well. Why did Billy Wagner shouldn't have waited until the end? He didn't save any more games the last 8 years that I checked. Did Billy Wagner come in and close any more games out? And someone said, oh, you know what? He is a Hall of Famer now that he got a couple more saves in there. No, it's a joke what they do with the Hall of Fame voting. They make it about themselves, and they get dragged for it. There's no other Hall of Fame of major sports in America that get dragged and ridiculed the way the baseball one does because how they handle it.
But in all fairness, that makes the baseball one the only one that people actually care about.
It's because they don't mess around with it.
They just put in 100 guys into the Hall of Fame of football because of the 100-year anniversary. Like, that's a joke. Basketball has college guys in the Hall of Fame. Hockey is the only semi-serious one, and they let everybody.
Basketball Hall of Fame is not the NBA Hall of Fame. It's the Basketball Hall of Fame. That's why there's college guys.
Well, yeah, but what I'm saying is that there are more omissions out of the Hall of Fame than there are mistakes in the Hall of Fame. And most of the time, the mistakes in the Hall of Fame, like the Jack Morrises and the Harold Baines, are put in a Veterans Committee. They're not put in by the writers. The writers get it right 90% of the time up until this shit show with the steroid era. Up until then, the writers have done a pretty good job. You could argue about the guys not, and you could argue about guys like Don Mattingly or Keith Hernandez, for example, two of our own guys not being in. But there was, before the steroid era, was there a guy that was like, holy crap, how has this guy never been in the Hall of Fame? And if you go back and look, there really wasn't. There wasn't many. You could count
Fred
them on
McGriff.
one hand.
But there wasn't. It wasn't covered the way it is now. I mean, listen. None of us can speak on what the buzz was in the mid '90s when Hall of Fame ballots came out. But now that they're not just made public, but they're easily available on Twitter, and you can see who's voting for them. They've released the percentages of the votes that come out. That's why it's that.
Oh yeah,
they're making it about themselves.
It's still I think the process. I think the bigger problem in the process is the Hall of Fame limited them to 10 names on the ballot, and they shrunk it from 15 years to 10 years. Now, granted, if you had unlimited names, the 10-year mark wouldn't matter because you could vote for as many people as possible. But when you're managing 10 different names, and historically there have been ballots, if you go back and look at the ballots, there are more than 10 Hall of Famers on a particular ballot. It's just the vote is so divided because your allocation of votes is a lot harder.
I'm fine with that. I'm fine if a ballot has 14 Hall of Fame worthy guys and you only can vote for 10. I don't have a problem with that. I really don't. I have a problem with if 2 years ago and 3 years ago you didn't put Billy Wagner on your ballot and you only put 3 guys and then 3 guys and then 2 guys, then you shouldn't. Why are you putting him on now? Unless, again, I'll give Corey his point as well. Some of the older writers are phased out, newer writers come in, so that will shift it slightly. And if that's the reason why it takes the guys long enough, then I guess so be it. But I think more than not, it's these writers who say like, well, if so-and-so took to their 5th ballot, I'm going to withhold my vote because I think it's a similar play. You are or you aren't. It's a 1 or a 0.
Yep. You mentioned Billy Wagner, and I forgot to bring up Wagner's profile here, but Billy Wagner, the 3rd member inducted into Cooperstown, Billy 7-time All-Star and NL Roll Age Relief Man of the Year. Going in on his final ballot, and Tom, I mean, there's not really much more you can say there. I think you sketched that out beautifully. I mean, it took the writers 10 years to finally get a player like Billy Wagner on, and so I do question. The longer you get into someone's tenure on a ballot, you got to think, hey, if you're entering year number 9, you're closing in on that potential induction in. Last year, it didn't work out for Gary Sheffield. I actually don't remember Gary Sheffield's a percentage. Maybe somebody in the chat, Swift, can help you out. His Swift's been all over the Hall of Fame stuff the last few months. But yeah, you got to think that something's got to change here. We can't let guys slip all the way to the end and then, okay, we got to throw them a vote to try to get a guy like Billy in. We saw this also happen when I believe Jim Rice too. Jim Rice was on the ballot. I think that was during the 15-year format.
Just doing a quick search of it. So last year, Billy Wagner had 68%, voting in. The year before that, it was at 51%. Year before that, he was at 47%. So it's not like, again, if it is like that, so many voters are being phased out and new ones are coming in. I don't know how many are coming in and going out. But to me, that doesn't seem like that's the case. It's guys who are saying, I'm going to make him wait. And that's ridiculous. It really is.
I think the one thing with Billy Wagner, too, just to touch on it, I mean, the relief position itself is a little bit difficult because you could have a absolutely dominant stretch for a couple of years and then get shelled for a couple of years and then find your way back late in the career, a lot back and forth. Wagner's numbers are interesting, though. And looking at the numbers again, it is consistently high performing, which is great to see. I mean, you look at his career ERAs for each individual season. He only had 1 year. That was the year 2000 with an ERA over 3. And that was a interesting year. Only pitched 28 games, had a 6 ERA. So that was a fluky year. Every other year is under 3, with a decent amount of them under 2. So obviously there he's got consistently very high performing numbers out of the relief position. I think what hurt him too, probably earlier on too in his career, was he went up alongside the most dominant reliever in history in Mariano Rivera. So Rivera was on such a plane by himself, obviously the king of the hill from the relieving class. I think that probably made people maybe underappreciate Billy Wagner a little bit. So, looking at the numbers, consistently very high performing. But again, to Tom's point, it took a long time. After 10 years, it's like, really, are you Hall of Famer after all of that time? So interesting debate. I will say Wagner. I'll get more into Wagner when we do our ESB vows a little later. But just want to call out that point. Really consistent numbers.
The great closer is like the great kickers in the NFL. You have to do it when it counts. And so this is the problem I think a lot of people have with Billy Wagner. His playoff numbers are not good. He's got 10 ERA in the playoffs. Granted, in very limited action in the playoffs. He was hurt the one time the Mets got into playoffs. He wasn't in it often. The Phillies stunk. They never got in the playoffs. And the couple times he was there for Houston, he didn't perform well. And I think that's a problem with Wagner. I think on the opposite side of the coin, listen, he has the highest strikeouts per nine in MLB history, 11.92 strikeouts per nine. That's number one in MLB history. He has the lowest opponent batting average, 187 in the history of baseball. He has the second lowest whip in the history of baseball. Granted, he's a reliever, so he's not pitching that much. He has the second best ERA in the live ball era with at least 900 innings with 2.31. These are all signs of a dominant pitcher. And from a run prevention standpoint, he's as good as it gets. He's as dominant as it gets. And if I'm looking at the closers that got in, Mariano's on his own level. He's always going to be on his own level. There's never going to be another person like Mariano. I said this to Rich when we were watching the playoffs. We watched Clase and Diaz and Holmes, and everybody blow saves. I don't even know if Holmes blew a save in the postseason. I said this. I texted Rich. There's never going to be another Mariano. There is no one that is him. So I got to take that aside. If I look at Wagner versus Hoffman, Wagner's a better closer than Hoffman was.
Hoffman just had the saves.
Lee Smith just got in. Wagner's a better pitcher than Lee Smith. He's a better pitcher than both of them.
May I ask?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joe. Sorry.
So that for me, the fact that he owns 2 MLB records, he is top 2 in 2 other major pitching categories. I had to put him in, and it took me a couple of years to kind of get on that wagon. But the fact of the matter is, though that matters.
I'm a big ticket punch guy when it comes to Hall of Fame numbers. I mentioned it before. Now with the closer, if we're just looking at saves, obviously Mariano Rivera, Trevor Hoffman, Lee Smith, top 3 Hall of Famers right now. Billy Wagner goes in; he's 8th at 422. Do you guys believe in a ticket punch for the amount of saves, or are we looking more at quality? Because if we're looking at the overall number of saves here, you got to consider K-Rod for future ballots. I think he's still hanging on. Francisco Rodriguez, I think, flies under the radar. He did get a number of votes in our simulated ballot. We'll get more into that a little bit later. But I even look at a guy like John Franco, Mets guy.
So that was exactly my point. I was about to bring up, Rich.
Go ahead, Tom.
So looking at K-Rod versus Wagner, they have very similar careers. They have K-Rod has him by like 20 saves. He has 1142 strikeouts. Wagner's 1196. So basically, in all intents and purposes, the same. They pitch roughly the same amount of innings as well. K-Rod pitched another 70 innings than Wagner, and he has more saves. But K-Rod got 10% of the vote, and I just don't see. Is Billy Wagner? Could you make the argument he's a better closer than K-Rod? Yeah, I think you can. And I think that would be the right side of the argument. Is he that much better that's how the vote would shake out? And then think of it this way as well. Kenley Jansen and Craig Kimbrell both have more saves. They have more saves than both of those guys, and also have similar type numbers if you're talking strikeouts. Are those guys Hall of Famers? And then that's when you start opening things up. But if that's where it gets interesting, because you're really starting to split hairs of I think Billy Wagner was a Hall of Famer. I did put him on my ballot. I didn't put K-Rod on my ballot. I think if I looked at K-Rod stuff a little closer, I would consider him, because if you're putting Wagner in, he's not that much better than K-Rod.
I think I think the big difference between the two, and like I said, now we're starting to split hairs, is there. If you look at Wagner's career, there's no dip. He is
That's
the
the
same
thing.
pitcher from start to finish, except for his final year where he blew out his arm. He is the same pitcher. With K-Rod and we'll have this problem with Jansen and Kimbrel. There are dips. The K-Rod has
Couple blips.
the first year
K-Rod
with
also is
was not great.
significantly better than Wagner in the playoffs. Wagner's
Yeah, he was.
postseason ERA is a 10.
Yeah.
A 10.
Right.
K-Rod's is a 2.5. It's just like I just don't like it. I think that they have to really start looking at these guys, and I think some of the writers don't look at the entire picture, because
I agree.
Those two guys are very similar, and to get one gets 80% and one gets 10% is not right.
A little bit of bias.
Yeah,
if you're gonna vote one, vote the other. If you're gonna vote for
there is
neither,
definitely
I'm fine with that too.
There's definitely an anti-relief pitcher core within the BBWAA, because you mentioned a bunch of great names that we grew up on. I mean, we lived in a golden age of closing. You know, while Mariano Rivera was completing his career and Trevor Hoffman's completing his career, you guys mentioned it, K-Rod, Craig Kimbrel, Kenley Jansen, Aroldis Chapman gets thrown into that mix as well. You know, if Fernando Rodney too, who was on this ballot, had a decent career. You travel down the saves leaders here. Raleigh Fingers, Dennis Eckersley, there's starts in there. You really can't count them in this mix. But a guy like Joe Nathan, I think he makes a play for a Hall of Fame case. So it's like, if you let one in, there's a case for all these guys.
So I think it's so important with any voting that you're doing for the Hall of Fame. You have to compare guys to people of their era. You can't compare what Billy Wagner did to Raleigh Fingers, because they were in Goose Gossage. Those guys were doing multiple innings. It's a different game. They played a different position. Everything is different every 10, 15 years. And that's how you have to compare it. And listen, I don't think K-Rod's going to get in. He went up 2% from last year. He's not, unless something crazy happens, like, he's not getting in.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Not even close.
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing. We'll get more into it later on today, I'm sure, when we do a couple of the profiles before we reveal our own ESBBWAA Hall of Fame election later on tonight. But yeah, as far as the inductees go, I think for the most part, the Hall got it right. You know, if you want to split hairs on CC being a first ballot to being a future ballot, so be it. I think they did a great job tonight with Ichiro, CC, and Billy Wagner going in to the Hall of Fame, and they'll be inducted in July. I think usually it's around the All-Star period. So before we get into our next bit, let's highlight some socials. Corey Favs, let's start it off with Instagram. We'll throw it over to Tom to talk on X.
Yeah, go ahead. Follow us on Instagram. We make a lot of reels, all the graphics from the show. Make it over to Instagram. We'll have different polls on there. It's a good time. So go ahead. We have 6,800 followers and growing at Empire State of Baseball. And you can follow all of us individually as well. Myself at Corey Favs, Joe at JR Pugs, Rich at Rich J. Rivera, and Tom at T. Wospil.
And also equally, come follow us over on Twitter. I'm not going to call it X because I'm not a loser. Over 3,300 followers over there at ESB Podcast. We also have our subsidiary accounts, ESB NYM for the Mets takes, ESB NYY for the Yankees takes. Sierra also joins in with Rich and I on that Yankee side. A lot of different stuff going on there. A lot of different threads. Occasionally, quite often, you have the four of us tweeting the same stuff at the same time, and we look a little silly doing it. But hey, that's what happens when four people own one Twitter account. Get a lot of takes being ripped off on that ESB Podcast account.
I like it. Throwing shots out there. Now, I'd shout it. This is where I usually would come in and shout out TikTok, but I have no idea if TikTok wants to stay online or not. There was a whole TikTanic from Saturday into Sunday. So we're still out there on TikTok. If TikTok's a thing wherever you live in the world, we're also there where you can go find us. Shout out to a couple. What was that, Tom?
dozens of followers on TikTok. Just
dozens of followers, the dozens and dozens. And shout out to our dozens and dozens of commenters, actually 130 plus in the building. So shout out to all you guys. Thank you for coming out. NFB of the Strike Zone, give NFB a follow and subscribe over on YouTube. Does great work over there. My buddy Andrew's in the building. Barry Bonds, right in vote. I think we're all in agreement there. Barry should be a Hall of Famer. Eric Katz in the building. Shout out to Eric. We got Boogie Daniel Bomber coming in from X. Pete Rose should be a unanimous Hall of Famer. We got Go Bills Rodriguez. My guy Tone says Ravens. LOL.
I'm rooting for him at this point. I got no qualms with the Bills.
Well, there you go. And then shout out to my guy Enrique. You want really the best haircut in the tri-state area, and no disrespect to Corey, Joe, and Tom's barber. This guy right here, Enrique Vargas, so we'll cut you up well over at City Fades in Staten Island. Shout out to Enrique for piecing this one up. So we love our barbers here on baseball pods.
Staten Island Staten Barbershop that you possibly.
And shout out to Jimmy Randazzo, also in the building. Jimmy Randazzo, give him and the team a follow over at Yankees Pod. Jimmy Randazzo always doing great things over there. And of course, our very own Sierra goes, just make sure you tip them, Rich. Yes, of course. We got to always tip your barbers. Always tip your barbers. All right. Now, before we get into our poll results, now what we did last year is we like to comp the ballots of the four hosts here and see how they did compared to the previous year of balloting. So let's get things started. And everybody's seen this ballot thrown around here. Like I've mentioned, 28 players up for the distinction of Hall of Famer, 14 newcomers. And we're going to start here with Corey Favs' ballots. Now, Corey, if we're looking side to side, Corey, you went sort of big hole last year. You voted 7. You downsized it to 3. What went into your thinking compared to your previous year's ballot?
My biggest thing is too, and even though I said I was a small hall guy, on the left side, that's a lot of names, but a lot of deserving names. It's got, several of the same ones from this year. Obviously, Adrian Beltre was a no doubt Hall of Famer. Mm-hmm. Some similar comparisons there, but I really wanted to embrace the small hall. Again, I think the Hall of Fame should be an elite class of elite players, not a collection of all-stars. If you could list every single all-star, you want to make a bunch of plaques, yeah, great, fine. I would be 100% in support of that. But the Hall of Fame is the elite of the elite. There really should only be a few players from each position in the same era. All right, I don't want 10 first basemen who played within the same time frame. No, that's aggressive. I don't want that. I'm a small hall guy. I look at some of the names I removed, and there were a lot of difficult names I removed from that conversation. Carlos Beltran, Andrew Jones. I mean, their stats are almost identical. The difference between the two, Andrew Jones was a bit more dominant over a shorter stretch, whereas Beltran was a little more consistent and played better over time. Billy Wagner was such a hard elimination. And the reason I eliminated these 3 guys is from my standpoint, and this kind of goes back to what Tom was saying earlier, too. You're either a Hall of Famer or you're not. And for me, doubling down on that and embracing the small hall, if I have to look up your stats to determine if you're a Hall of Famer, then you're not a Hall of Famer. It should be an instinctual vote. If you watch that player play during your lifetime, and we watched all of these players play for their whole careers, you either know a player is a Hall of Famer or not. I'm excluding steroids entirely from my vote because Manny Ramirez and Alex Rodriguez were 2 of the most dominant players of our lifetime on the offensive side of the ball. A-Rod on the defensive side as well. So I'm going to exclude steroids for the purpose of that conversation. Obviously, Ichiro, we spoke in a lot of detail at length earlier, so he's a no-doubter. But I want to know, gut feeling, are you a Hall of Famer or not? I shouldn't have to look up stats and compare it to 20 other players. I did have Billy Wagner at one point as my 4th on this list, and I got stuck into the comparison again. Well, looking versus Kenley Jansen. I don't think Kenley Jansen's a Hall of Famer, but you have the arguments with numbers. Same thing with Craig Kimbrell, somewhat similar numbers. I don't think Kimbrell's a Hall of Famer. And the fact that I had to debate that too much with the stats, you're not a Hall of Famer. It should be a gut feeling. We've watched so many players and so many teams over the course of our lifetime. you should just know if a player is a Hall of Famer or not. And that's why I went really small Hall on this one.
It was very interesting though, because your voting path, and we didn't have the graphic up there, but your voting path in 2023 is very similar to what you did last year. So it wasn't like a gradual decrease
Correct.
of I'm gonna make it. I'm starting to feel towards a small hall. You were just like right next year, bam! Like I'm going towards the best of the best. So
Yep.
It was a very interesting way to see you vote this year.
And I think the big thing too was trying to eliminate the bias side of it, because obviously I'm happy that Billy Wagner made it because I love Billy Wagner. Carlos Beltran, I hope he gets in. As a Met fan, I have all the appreciation in the world for what he did. CC Sabathia, from the outside looking in, he won me a lot of fantasy leagues back in the day, so I could appreciate what CC Sabathia did on the mound. But I had to remove the biasy from it. And the fact that I had to do all of those comparisons, it just told me instinctually I should know if a player's a Hall of Famer or not. That's why I made the reduction. If I truly want to embrace the smallest of small Hall mindset, I have to let go of my love for some of those players and do the right thing and embrace the philosophy.
Speaking of small Hall, Joe, let's take a look at your ballots here compared to what you did last year. And again, it's very interesting ballot, considering that you had your steroid guys in, you had Manny and A-Rod in, you had them off this one. And it's not like there are other folks in here that needed to replace those guys. You still kept it small, but you left off two guys that you voted in last year. So what changed?
Yeah, so I go back and forth on a yearly basis on the steroid guys. I think if Bonds and Clemens and them were on the ballot, I'd vote for them. And I think I came to the conclusion this year that if you have a suspension because of steroids in an era where there was full testing, you are willingly trying to cheat the system. And for A-Rod and Manny, they have the longest or the second and third longest suspensions for steroids ever. So for me, that at this moment is my line in the sand. If you were suspended for steroids, I think that's a little different than when it was the Wild West. These guys were not suspended during the Wild West. These guys were suspended in an era where they tested. Both Hall of Fame hitters, both Hall of Fame players, as far as right-handed offensive players, two of the greatest players of all time. There's no doubt in my mind. Those suspensions loom large for me, and in this particular year, that was my thing. The one player I did vote for, two players I vote for. I want to touch on first is Carlos Beltran. Beltran is to me a Hall of Famer. He is one of 5 players with 400 home runs and 300 steals. Do you know who the other 4 are? Willie Mays, Barry Bonds, Alex Rodriguez, and Andre Dawson. He is 4th all time in switch hitter home runs behind Mickey Mantle, Eddie Murray, and Chipper Jones. He's only 33 home runs behind Chipper Jones. The fact that he did that, plus played in center field with gold gloves, to me, that's a Hall of Famer. He's in such exclusive clubs. If you look at his numbers compared to Andre Dawson, they're almost the exact same. I mean, they are within millimeters of each other in terms of home runs. Dawson has 3 more. Dawson has 2 more stolen bases than Beltran. That's how close they are, and all their stats are like that. Average, slugging, all the works. They're within millimeters of each other. So,
and the real deal, Beltran's votes are trending towards a potential Hall induction for next year.
He's going to get in. Yes, he's going to get in. And here's the other thing: if you look at center fielders, after the obvious ones, there's not many. There's not many great all-time center fielders. After you got Mays, you got Mantle, you got DiMaggio. After that, Griffey, there's a drop-off very quickly on center fielders. So he plays a premium position, one that does not have many great offensive players throughout history. So that, to me, got him in. And then my last vote was for Felix. I went back and forth on this a bunch, but it came down to the fact that I think Felix was the best pitcher on this ballot. when you look at him and when you take into account who was the most dominant pitcher at their peak, Felix was a better pitcher than CC at his peak. That's just a fact. So that's why I voted for him. We need to start looking at pitchers now by their peak. We're never going to have pitchers past the Scherzer and Verlander that are going to accrue 200 plus wins.
It's just interesting. It's interesting because I mentioned a very good peak. I mentioned a 7-year peak for CC Sabathia, and you had nothing to say.
Listen, Joe is only voting for Felix Hernandez because he wants to be able to make the case for Jacob deGrom in the future, who isn't a Hall of Famer.
Felix has 3 years with an ERA lower than CC's best year. Felix is a better pitcher. If you have one game with your life on the line, you're taking prime Felix or you're taking prime CC. You're taking Felix.
That's not how this works. Is Josh Hamilton a Hall of Famer? Prime Josh Hamilton was like one of the best baseball players I've ever seen. Is he a Hall of Famer?
No, of course not.
Okay, well then your point.
But Felix has a 7-year period. He's the best pitcher in baseball.
Not 7-year.
The thing with Felix too, because what hurt him for me was just how hard he fell once he hit 29 years old. Now he came up early. You can see there he came up. He was a 20-year-old pitcher. So that's CC. Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
Felix was 19. Right? Yeah, 19. Thank you. Yeah. So once he hit 29 and 10 years in the league, he completely fell off. He had the 353, the 382, 436, 5, 6. He completely fell off hard. But he had a really dominant stretch in the middle there. I actually appreciate the career for CC more than Felix. And it's a little bit of the opposite because if we go back to the hitter side, you look at Carlos Beltran and Andrew Jones. If you're going to make that comparison, Andrew Jones was more dominant over a shorter stretch than Beltran, but Beltran got the vote to the Hall and Jones did not. So that's the one discrepancy I have. It's just because Andrew Jones was so dominant in a shorter stretch than Beltran. And Felix Hernandez was more dominant over a shorter stretch than CC, but Beltran and CC had the better overall careers.
My problem fundamentally with CC is he is not an ace pitcher for more than half his career. That's just the reality of the situation. If you look at these numbers, he has 8 seasons above a 4 ERA. He has 11 seasons above a 3.5 ERA. I'm sorry. If you play 19 years and 11 seasons, you're above a 3.5 ERA. The idea that you're some great ace is a myth because you weren't an ace. For majority of your career, he's not an ace. He turns into an ace in 2006, and he's done being an ace in 2012. Let's be real. Look at those numbers. That's when he's done. He's done. So it's a very, very short window for him being an ace. And the majority of the time, he's a number 2. He's a number 3 pitcher. 2013, 2014, CC's not a great pitcher. He's not. He's barely a league average pitcher at that point.
Kevin Cruz at NYYU goes, but their ERA plus is the same, and CC pitched 5 more years.
I understand that, but 5 more years at an over 4 ERA.
All right, let's get to ERA plus is the same. So meaning he was able to stretch that out longer. But listen, there's a word, there's a C word out there that people get very upset when they hear, and that's compiler. And listen, you have to compile stats to make the Hall of Fame. That is just how it is. Rich, what did you think I was going to say? Listen, you have to compile stats to be in the Hall of Fame. You have to be available. CC was available. He took the ball. He went out there and he pitched. Felix Hernandez was incredible at his peak, and he didn't pitch anymore. Listen, how many guys do we complain about now, where we worry about that they're always hurt? CC pitched.
Let me ask you another question, Tom. Who's a better pitcher, CC Sabathia or Johan Santana?
CC had a better career than Johan.
No, Johan had a better career.
Johan had a better peak. He won 2 Cy Youngs, but CC was able to shoot out longer.
Look, if you look up Johan's ERA, he led the league in ERA 3 times. Johan had a stretch of 8 years where he had a sub 3 ERA. So when I'm looking at the modern pitcher, I got to look at that. To me, Johan's a Hall of Famer. Johan got robbed because Johan, without question, is the best
didn't-
pitcher in baseball for an entire 7-year stretch.
No,
There
I
is
completely
no argument.
agree.
7-year stretch.
I completely agree that Johan and Felix definitely were the more dominant. And
Johan has. You can make that argument for maybe a 5-year stretch. There's a 3-year peak in there where yes, he was the best pitcher, but he only pitched for 12 years. He didn't do it long enough.
I agree, and that's why I think he goes into the not quite Sandy Koufax level, but that's why I got to consider him in that vein, because he every year he's a 3.2 ERA.
Yeah. Now, I think Johan and Felix, in my standpoint, are basically in the same category. It's one's a lefty, one's a righty, but it's the same category of dominant pitchers who just fell off. Now, Johan was due to injury, and Felix, I don't know what happened to Felix. He just completely fell off once he hit 30 years old. But if they had another 2 or 3 years at that high level of dominance, I think both of them are no doubt Hall of Famers. It's just that they just fell off, again, for different reasons.
And again, my thing also, here's the thing with Felix. I voted for him this year. I very, very close for me. I was on the razor's edge with Felix. I'll be the first to admit that. So there might be a situation where I don't vote for him next year. It may happen.
Stats are going to change.
Let's get to the next ballot, and that's going to be my ballot here. And I stayed relatively consistent here. I still kept Beltran, Hunter, Jones. Hunter Jones, I feel like for me, it's either if you're voting for one, you might as well vote for the other. Defensively, they're there. Offensively, they're relatively close. We'll pull up the numbers on Jones again in a little bit. I'm a big steroid guy. I'm a big PED guy. I think these guys got to get in. I think it's ridiculous that it's been this long of a conversation, and it's almost like baseball did the adverse. You want to forget about these guys' history, yet they're on the ballot every year, so they're a part of the conversation. And even to this point, like Barry Bonds is not on the conversation. Barry Bonds is mentioned a few times here in our chat. So it's like you guys did the adverse, and I've always mentioned it. In Cooperstown, Corey, Joe, you remember this. I was with you in Cooperstown. Was there not a steroid era exhibit in Cooperstown?
Yes.
Ridiculous. So you're going to honor the achievements, but not actually cherish the players that did it. It makes no sense to me. So I'm a big PED guys into the Hall of Fame. So Manny and A-Rod get my vote. I got CC and Etro in there this year. Billy Wagner had it year to year. The one difference, and I don't have his stat page, unfortunately, is Bobby Abreu. Joe's favorite player here, Bobby Abreu. If I had 11 votes last year, I would have put Bobby Abreu in. I think Bobby Abreu had a 7 or 8 year period where he was averaging 20-plus homers, 97 RBIs, solid glove. Wasn't awful in the outfield. He just got outshined by a better outfield class, a better offensive class in the National League in the 2000s.
You just said a solid fielder and, guy that maybe gets
really
all-star voting nod. Bobby Abreu, if we're going it when you see it, Bobby Abreu's not a Hall of Famer. I love Bobby Abreu.
He's not eligible because he's playing on the Yankees this year.
I would love again. I co-sign. I would sign up for that. Bobby Abreu, if you saw him, I don't know. You're about, man, but he's not Hall of Fame. Great player, not Hall of Fame.
And again, I'm a big Hall guy. The one consistency you're going to see every year is I'm always going to have 10 in there. If I'm going to Cooperstown, I want to see as many players as possible. If folks want to live in fantasy land and talk small hall, that's great. But unfortunately, Cooperstown is not a small hall. There are over 400 members in the Hall of Fame. How long did it take us to get through Cooperstown at the end of the Hall of Fame? It took us about 2.5 to 3 hours. If it was a true small hall, it'd take us 15 minutes to get through the Hall of Fame. It's not that case. I'm down to voting 10, the max every single time. And I'll find another couple of players now because I got to find at least 3 to replace the guys who are getting inducted this year. So that's my ballot in comparison. And Tom, let's go to yours real quick before we get to our results of our ESBBWAA. Again, pretty consistent. There's no difference. No, there's zero difference between what you had this year to last.
Listen, I'm a man of integrity, which is something this show lacks. Apparently, I keep my vote the same. And I will say this: I will hand up. I need to relook at K-Rod, and I'm gonna put K-Rod on my ballot next year if I'm putting Billy Wagner in, because their careers are very similar. But like you said, Manny and A-Rod, they're Hall of Famers. CC, Ichiro, Billy Wagner, obviously, got in. I'll take the little moment to speak on Andrew Jones. I think he's absolutely a Hall of Famer. He was possibly the best defensive center fielder any of us have ever seen. He was incredible. And he also has like 430 home runs. A weird career, right? He does tail off at the end. He does kind of bounce around at the end. That's something you normally see from a lot of Hall of Fame players. But he compiled the stats. He was the other thing is you have to be a top player, right? Like you have to be considered one of the best players at your position for a long time and for a peak. He was undoubtedly one of the best center fielders in baseball in the late 90s, early 2000s, and he passes that eye test. Andrew Jones did things on a baseball field that none of us have seen. He basically played center field behind second base, and then he was I dare you to hit it over my head, and I will run it down. It was incredible player, should be a Hall of Famer.
Yep. And Andrew Jones last year, if you guys remember when we did the ESPBWAA, was one of 2 inductions in our simulated Hall of Fame, along with Adrian Beltre. Of course, Beltre went in along with Todd Helton and Joe Mauer for the real deal. Jones still here with us.
For everyone here.
Go ahead.
No, if you finish up, then I'll give my pop quiz after.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Let's see the pop quiz.
Percentage change increase for this year. Who had the biggest increase?
Biggest increase this year.
Was it Utley?
It was not Utley. Utley was third biggest increase.
Was it Wagner? Jumping up? What did he jump up? 10%, we said?
He jumped up like 8%. Also, I'm just judging this off of what they have in Wikipedia. I'm assuming it's correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Andrew Jones.
Was it Beltran?
It was not. Beltran was second, 13.2. This guy had 14.4% increase.
I feel like it's somebody we haven't covered.
It is someone we haven't really talked about today.
Andy Pettit.
Andy Pettit had the highest increase. And that's when you talk about guys like K-Rod went up by 2.4%. Guys don't jump. K-Rod would have to go up by like 15% for like 5 years or whatever to get there. It's.
But come on, guys, Pettit's not a Hall of Fame pitcher.
I'm not saying. I'm just. I was asking a question.
Yeah.
And there's an answer, and it's 14.4%. He had.
No, I know. But like I said, this was my problem with the pitching crop this year. Is the difference between them is very small in terms of ERA plus, for all the pitchers on the ballot. So, like, it is divided in halves. Burley and Pettit are not Hall of Fame pitchers. They are great pitchers, workhorses, guys you would take any single day of the week, but they are not Hall of Fame pitchers. And my thing is, if we open Pandora's box and we start adding guys on the other side of 3.5 ERA consistently to Hall of Fame, it's going to be watered down real quick, because there is a ton of pitchers who fit into that category. For me, that have been left off for years, and I think we're gonna have 15 more pitchers going into the Hall of Fame that aren't really Hall of Fame pitchers.
Andy Pettit's his candidacy really centers around his postseason career. What he had 44 appearances with a 3.8 ERA in the postseason.
Oh, he was.
I'm not saying he's in, but I think he's at a different level than Burley because of his postseason and being the stud pitcher. Yeah. He was the backbone really for the Yankee staff that had other.
He's a good postseason pitcher
on it.
Mm-hmm. He has as many. He's got some stinkers in the postseason as well as successes, but
I mean,
he's a good postseason.
Let's keep it moving, because we do have to get into the results here. We're at almost 9:05 p.m. here on the East Coast, and I think it is that time to get into our ESB BWAA election. And just like last year, of
Oh
course,
my God.
I love it.
of course,
You are
we
such
have
a
Tom. Get it
loser.
out now because I'm gonna go about a minute here.
You're such a loser. My
Okay,
God.
there you go. All right.
Looks like,
well,
look like going to a funeral right now.
you got to dress for the occasion. It'll be yours when we have to fill that seat in about a couple months.
Oh,
All righty.
you
So
could never fill this seat. Never could.
All right, folks, it's time. On behalf of Empire State of Baseball, it is my honor to announce the results of the 2025 ESBBWAA Hall of Fame election. For this year, and special thanks to our very own Corey Favs for his tireless efforts, we collected votes based on two methods. Ballots, which were filled out by 102 voters, and polls, which were completed daily by our followers on X. So thank you all once again for participating in both forms of voting. The average percentage between the two methods were calculated for our final tally, which resulted in over 2,700 individual votes. What's going on here? Why am I getting filmed? What's happening?
I'm not getting a film. I'm just bored.
Okay, great.
Come
This
on.
year's ballot featured 28 players, including 14 newcomers and one who is on the final ballot of his career. And now we welcome multiple members into our version of Cooperstown. Our first inductee, who will be joining Dick Allen, Dave Parker, Tom Hamilton, and Thomas Boswell in the class of 2025, is a 10-time All-Star, 10-time Gold Glove Award winner, a 2-time batting champion, American League Rookie of the Year, and MVP in 2001. He holds a single-season hits record with 262, a 3,000 hit club member, and now the first Japanese-born player into the Hall of Fame. Congratulations, Ichiro Suzuki, who got obviously into the real hall. This was no surprise. Ichiro Suzuki going in with 97.5% of the
Nice.
ESBBWAA ballots. Now, I will say there with Ichiro, he was 100% on the ballots. He was not 100% in the polls. I think he was like 95-5. So, of course, it was the average of the two. All right.
Boogie.
Our next inductee is a 6-time All-Star, an ALCS MVP, which resulted in his only World Series championship. Joe knows where I'm going with this one. He is a 2007 Cy Young Award winner for the American League and a member of the 3,000 Strikeout Club. He will also be welcomed into Cooperstown on his first ballot. Congratulations, CC Sabathia, also in the Hall of Fame. So far, we're just like the regular BBWAA, and I say so far.
The percentages are close too.
We have one member remaining. Yeah, so CC went in at 80.7. On the real ballot, it was 86.
Yeah, not bad. You know, a few percentage points away.
And our final inductee, 7-time All-Star, 1999 NL Roll-A's Relief Man of the Year, and entering the National Baseball Hall of Fame on its final ballot. Yes, folks, we did it. Congratulations, Billy Wagner, for getting in the Hall of Fame at 75.8% of the total vote.
That's like one vote.
And there you go, folks. And trust me when I tell you, this was done 24 hours, well, just about 24 hours ago when we ended the polls at 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern time yesterday. But yes, we matched the BBWAA on their ballot. So really cool stuff. And the first time we've done that on the show. So let's take a look at the overall percentages here. And as I mentioned before, Ichiro at 97.5. CC at 80.7, Wagner at 75.8. Now, a little bit of difference. We don't have the graphic of the real ballot. A-Rod finished in 4th, and A-Rod was just about 2 votes away from getting in.
So the two knuckleheads above us right here, Tweedledee and Tweedledum, is what's keeping A-Rod out of the Hall of Fame. Good job,
A-Rod's
guys.
keeping A-Rod out of the Hall of Fame.
Absolute ass clowns.
So A-Rod in at 73.8. Beltran also relatively close. Andrew Jones up there. Manny Ramirez. Let's go to the next bit of this. King Felix got a good percentage there, 48.6. Pettit. David Wright got a lot of love, especially late. I thought there was a point that David Wright was going to make a strong late push there. But yeah, we're scaling down here. And again, 75% of the vote needed for induction. And there's a lot of folks that, hey, if this was a real deal, they'd be on next year's ballot as well. And as far as the ones that dropped off, there you have it. There's only 5. Ben Sobers, Carlos Gonzalez, Russell Martin, Hanley Ramirez. Can you believe with all the votes we freaking got, not one person, not one fucking person between polls and ballots not give Ian Kinsler a vote.
Not even the spam vote.
Poor Ian Kinsler.
Yep.
one for Ian Kinsler. I thought that was hysterical. So there you have it. So, Corey, when you looked at these results here, anything stick out to you that you were like, wow, he got a higher percentage than I thought?
I mean, overall, I think relatively consistent, and the guys who are on the buffer there, A-Rod and Manny. Again, I had them both in, but I know the whole steroid debate's interesting. I thought A-Rod might have had a little more push, but again, I'm not generally surprised. Looking at this set of numbers too, David Wright, 35%. Again, I actually think that the voters were doing good this year, man. I got to give a shout out to the voters, all right?
Hell yeah.
I think you all did a very good job. I mean, our results mirror, outside of a few percentage points here and there, mirror the actual results for who got in. And, so I kudos to everyone. I'm pretty happy with the consistency. And there's nothing that really stands out like, wow, that guy got in, but he should not have been close. All the guys down here, everyone from Rodney down to Kinsler, they shouldn't be in there. I think the voters did a good job.
Who voted for Zobrist? Zobrist got like 4 votes.
That might be the biggest shock. Is Zobrist getting 4.5%?
It's wild how some of it went. And when we threw these ballots out, there was a lot of. It wasn't just New York-based fans. There were Boston fans in there, Baltimore, Dodger fans that were voting in. So we definitely had a very more diverse fan base compared to the last couple of years of balloting. So again, thank you all for joining. Again, over 2,700 individual votes. There was 102 on the ballot, and I think it was under 2K on the polls as well. So I know there's probably crossover as well. But thank you all who did participate. I was trying to look at the numbers to see what was close to what we got here. Mark Feinstein posted the vote results here, and I gotta tell you, even like looking at Beltran was 71.8 in the real ballot. He was 70.3. I mean, that is pretty freaking close. All considering. So shout out to all you guys at home. Did a great job. And just a couple more statistics here if we want to throw this out. Actually, wait, hold on a second before I get to any. Tom, I just want to make sure you're awake, you're alert. Did you want to say anything about the Hall of Fame before I moved on? 40 years.
No, I mean, I feel like we've kind of covered it. We've kind of beat that horse for the last 40 minutes. So yeah, we're good.
Is that what we did the show about? It was about the Hall of Fame, huh? All right, well, let's take a look at this vote distribution. So our vote distribution, as I mentioned, we weighed both the ballot and the poll. Now, interesting thing, if we did not do the weighted system, Billy Wagner was not going to make it on the ballot. Billy Wagner was at 70.6 on the ballot. The polls are 81. You accrued the two together. He was at 75.8, just making it in. A-Rod, if we were just going based off of polls, Tom's guy, Alex Rodriguez, would have made the Hall of Fame. But because of the ballots, it weighed against Alex Rodriguez and he came off. Now, Ichiro and CC crushed it on both ends. Ichiro, 100%, 102 ballots came in with Ichiro Suzuki's name on it, which I think was impressive. That not one person messed up and forgot to leave Ichiro off on the ballot. I think that was pretty impressive in and of itself. I don't know what happened on the polls there, but CC, Ichiro, and Billy Wagner there get in. And then finally, percentage changed. Tom, you mentioned before, Andy Pettit getting an increase in the real ballot. Well, guess what? In the simulated ballot, Andy Pettit had an 18.1% increase from 2024 to 2025. Chase Utley, who had a decent increase in the real ballot, got a decrease in hours, went down to negative 12.1%. So interesting stuff there. Andrew Jones, who was in our Hall of Fame last year, out of it this year. Crazy
Give it
stuff.
up.
So, and there you have it. There you have it.
Listen,
He slid one time, and
Chase Utley had a great 4-year stretch. He was let's be real, his last 5-6 years, he was a glorified platoon player. So
he was still playing.
I'm not inducting him. He shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. I'm sorry.
Well, congratulations to the three who got in for the real ballot, the simulated ballot. CC, Ichiro Suzuki, and Billy Wagner. And with that, it is 9:13. So let's get ready to close this show. And before we do that, Joe, let's talk about YouTube. And let's get some subscribers over on YouTube. If you haven't subscribed already, get that damn thing going. Joe, take it away.
Yes, we are live on Instagram, but YouTube is our preferred platform for you guys to view it. Why? We can interact with you in the chat. We can bring up wonderful comments like this. And
Grow up, people.
make you part of the show if you watch on YouTube. So go over there, follow us, Empire State of Baseball. You can hit the like button on all our videos. Subscribe. Subscriptions are free. They are free. They cost nothing, so there's no reason not to do it. We're on the road, I believe, to 500 subs, and we will be doing a giveaway once we get to 500 subs. So make sure you help us get there, and then we can be part of the big giveaway once we get there. And yeah, that's it.
That is it. Yeah, and if we get to that 500, like Joe mentioned, that giveaway, I think right now they're paced that probably early spring we're looking at a giveaway episode. But speaking of episodes, we got another episode of Extra Innings coming up in just a few short moments, hosted by Joe, Sierra, and I. So we'll take the X banter over to the ESP podcast page. So make sure you give us a follow there. And of course, our next episode will be our final episode of the off-season tri-weekly schedule. That was a lot of words right there. But February 10th, which is a Monday, will be our last of the tri-weeklies. And then once we get to March, we're back to weekly episodes just like that. And we'll get the countdown to season. So our next episode will be the last of our current off-season schedule. And we'll see you on that Monday, February the 10th. But that is it for Empire State of Baseball. And we'll take it around the room and have Corey Favs wrap this thing up. And I'll go first, kick it over to Tom and Joe. I just want to thank again everybody who showed up. We had 160 live viewers in today, so really do appreciate it. It is tough getting that consistency when you're going every so often. So I definitely appreciate you guys showing up for us tonight, and especially for those who participated in the ballots and the polls that accrued. Again, over 2,700 individual votes is crazy for us. So thank you very much for your participation. We really do appreciate that. Of course, Corey, Joe, and Tom, appreciate your work as always. And just one last thing, and a little bit of a bittersweet episode for me, not necessarily for Corey, Joe, and Tom, but this will be my final episode in my current setup. This has been the same setup I rocked with for a long time between
God,
Empire
I thought you were quitting the show. I was so excited.
No, I know you would have thrown a celebration, but this place was my setup for a long time.
Champagne.
Definitely different names, man. He knows how to ruin a good speech, right? But through we had different names. R40 Studio, REM Studio. I couldn't come up with a name, but it will always be home. So I definitely appreciate a lot of the memories that were served.
You can just call it your bedroom. Also
very excited to get going in the new studio in a few weeks' time. Shut up, Tom. Go ahead, Tom.
Nah, I've said my piece.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate that. All right, Joe, let's go.
No, that fun day for baseball. Again, Hall of Fame talk, great. And I'm sure I'm going to hear some of it on the space afterwards.
Yeah, no, I just want to echo the sentiments and love the feedback with the ballots, love the participation for everyone. The fact that our results mirrored the actual results and the percentages were relatively close too. We just got a knowledgeable group here. So, want to thank everyone for tuning in and the three of you for joining me on this show. But again, until we meet next time, take care.